Hello, everyone. I'm Rautio. I'm going to be talking about the article we wrote for this special issue about strange objects. So it was written together with Hohti, Tammi, and Ylirisku. And I'm just going to talk through it. All the references and all the juicy bits are in the article. I hope you can hear me. So yeah, please refer to the article for the bigger picture. So contemporary scholars of environmental education and research of sustainability education are increasingly connected by the problems that we study and that the world proposes to us, rather than particular methods or approaches. It's not like we're qualitative thinkers or we're this and that approach. It's rather, this is the shared problem that we approach from various viewpoints. So in the paper that we wrote, we align with the idea that research of environmental and sustainability education is not so much or not only about facing a task of formulating new theories and proposing new methodologies. Thank you for participating. But it's a task of also understanding and resituating our existing research practices. So not so much as like realizing that there's a problem and coming up with something completely new to solve it, but rather revisiting the things that we've sort of always done as researchers and understanding them in new ways. So the strange object or the resisting object that we write about is something that's not easily understood with existing approaches. It is something that resists traditional discipline boundaries, and it's something that requires scholars to both collaborate in their thinking as well as to change the definitions and practices of their disciplines and fields. She goes. So the paper includes 3 different examples from working with strange objects, 3 methodological stories, if you will, and 3 peeks into the research processes and practices that we engage in with Dora and Reika and Henrika. Each of the 3 stories is a little bit different, but they're all connected by what we identify as a post-qualitative research orientation. And we describe this as an additive one at the end of the paper, following Bruno Latour. So in the first story, Riikka and Dora describe and talk about their work in an educational greenhouse. And they keep resituating their research practices that lean on ethnography. They describe how and where their own animal turn took place, how their ethnographical practices began to accommodate the animal turn and live out the animal turn that was taking place and is taking place in the human and social sciences. So for them, it was less a conscious choice of like, let's embrace the animal turn and go along with it. And it was more about a situation that demanded it, that gave rise to the kind of modification of their thinking and practices that was required in that situation, which was that they entered a fieldwork school that had a huge greenhouse zoo in the middle of it, complete with countless small animals. So the mere existence of animals in a school, within the normative and normalized frames of schools and schooling that are pretty universal that we can all recognize. So just the existence of animals within these frames was instantly a strange thing. For Tura and Riikka, it would be for, I would argue, most. So it began to raise questions and also to sustain questioning rather than hurrying Riikka and Ture to find any answers. So they followed Vincian Despret, who talks about polite visiting. And as part of this polite visiting, Vincian Despret advocates for the possibilities of transformation in research. And she doesn't mean transformation of the research participants, but researchers, saying that those you went to visit are never quite who or what you expected, and you yourself are not quite what you thought either. And I quote Riikka and Ture from our article, we listened to stories, and each story seemed to change and mutate something in the interactive fashion we described above. We started a field note practice of hanging with the events and stories and writing new ones, compiling an archive of stories that we named The Compost. End quote. The strangeness of the educational zoo was even more evident after Riikka and Ture visited other schools. It had to do with temporality. Whereas other schools operated with one singular institutional time, it seemed, the greenhouse school opened up a temporal multiplicity, challenging the institutional frames, at least within the walls of the greenhouse. And in this way of doing research, instead of having clear and predetermined object of research beforehand, and knowing this beforehand, this approach by Riikka and Ture allowed all kinds of things to be picked up along the way, all kinds of stories, partial ones, speculative ones, without knowing how they will start to work with each other. So putting all of these stories into their story compost that they describe, and without knowing what kind of an object would be formed during the process. Riikka and Ture quote Kaisa Kortekallio in concluding that as much as the researcher is performing inquiry, they're also played out by it. So these are among the insights that help to view the researcher's body as something through which material semiotic currents pass and diffract. Storytelling presented Riikka and Ture a possibility of joining something, an ongoing stream of stories and bodies in co-production. The second story is by me, and it's about a girl and a horse. It began as a conventional inquiry, but began to resist the existing framings and ways of working that I had, or that the society or our culture in the north of Finland, the horse culture, the framings that that culture had. And my response to this resistance was to give space to it, give space to the strangeness and resistance by adding on new modes of inquiry as we went along with the research project with the girl and the horse. This means that I would keep changing my plans and adding new elements in the research design, new materials, new locations, new activities, new everything, anything. The girl, Katie, was not a strange object, nor was her relationship with the horse a strange object in the way that we would talk about them. The strange object in my story is the methodological construct and the entire research design, or the process of research. I describe in my story how I encountered strange moments or resistance when I was trying to accommodate Katie's preferred way of relating to a horse. And in those moments when facing resistance, how I kept on responding by adding elements to the inquiry. So I was not trying to further focus, I was trying to then further open up more and more and different to make space for this strangeness. I did not begin with a single strange object, but I was creating one as the research process unfolded. And I accommodated more and more paths in order to create a space for Katie, the girl, and Hilima, the horse, to exist in a way that seemed to be required. I understand research as an unfolding process, and the methodological construct I understand as a co-produced research space, which is a strange object that in itself is the object of research. The process and the co-construction of the research space is kind of the object of the whole thing. It's like a laboratory in a way. The third story is by Henrika, and it's about how to think with the forest. Henrika describes how her research concepts, those that are critically addressing human centrism, followed her into the forest on her spare time when she was not a researcher, but an athlete engaged in orienteering, running and finding her way in the woods for a sport. The concepts would follow nevertheless and make her question her movements and the practices of orienteering in the woods. It did not take long before the forest began to participate in Henrika's research and to teach Henrika to think, as she writes. Much in line with the first and the second story, research practices start to unfold from the process itself and cannot be known in advance. So the idea of methods as processes of gathering data and then reporting on what you find turns to being in the world that is open to experimentation, Henrika writes, and quoting Stephanie Springay and Sarah Truman. Relying on human language appeared limited for Henrika in the woods, and attempts to think beyond human meaning making seemed clumsy for her. The forest kept on resisting human words, and the forest remained strange, a strange object. Using her sport, orienteering, as a propositional catalyst, also from Springay and Truman, Henrika engaged in a process with the forest, in which the forest was reorienting and reteaching her to experience its multiplicity in a different way. And this process lasted for not only 2 or 3 runs, or even 1 season, but several years. So more about the 3 stories in the juicy details and like all details in general, go and read the article. I'm going to sum up somehow what this is all about with regard to environmental and sustainability education research. The 3 examples all share an attitude that we recognize as typical to most post-qualitative inquiry. It's what Bruno Latour would call an additive empiricist take. Additive empiricism. This is when the phenomenon under study is approached by actively engaging with it, not observing, not analyzing with some predetermined means, but actively engaging with it, poking and probing and responding to it and seeing what happens. Adding, complicating, slowing down and hesitating in order to explore and to multiply the possible versions that could exist in any given social, historical, cultural, political, whatever situation. So when talking about strangeness, it's important to realize that objects are not, of course, they're not inherently strange, by essence, but that they become produced as strange by processes, different processes, which then call our attention. So in a way, the sense of strangeness for us, for a researcher, is a signal that there's something in the world that could be known differently than it currently is. Post-qualitative approaches can, but they don't automatically, highlight the role of co-production in research. When they do, however, the inquiries have potential to address the pitfalls that have often been located to exist in any post-paradigm or new materialist research approaches, namely the danger of glossing over social injustices and inequalities between humans when advocating a focus on the non-human and the material. So we're thinking that whenever or when post-qual approaches are address or highlight co-production in research, this pitfall of glossing over injustices could be avoided or addressed. And furthermore, to move beyond mere proliferation of different paths that we also often see in post-qual research, is that we end up producing just more and more alternatives without putting our foot down as to what would be the more desirable version. We just like produce more and more, like you could think about it in this way and this way and this way. So to move beyond that, the strange objects portrayed in this paper all show that the created research spaces in themselves can be understood as concrete testimony of the possibilities and limitations of what can be done, what is possible now, with what conditions, and what might be possible for future societies and space, what would then require for future spaces and frames of action. So the research space in itself is a testimony that something can be done or thought of differently. Yes, I think this was my talk, with the chickens being very confused hearing me talk English. They recognize my voice and apparently the language as well, because they usually are very friendly and all over me, but now they hear me talk in English and they find it strange. And this was a genuine surprise to me. I was hoping to be surrounded by chickens, but they find the language a strange choice. Thanks, everyone.